Okay, I wanted to make a short video looking at how to soften some old rubber CT90 airbox rubber parts. Some of these are actually in pretty good shape and pretty pliable. Some of the other ones are a lot more rigid and hardened with age. So what I'm going to do is try something I've seen elsewhere on the web where you mix oil wintergreen or actually it's methyl silicate or methyl silate and rubbing alcohol. I've already made up a mixture that's about 25% of the oil of wintergreen and the rest 75% rubbing alcohol. And I'm going to take my two worst parts here and I'm going to soak those parts and I'll come back later after these parts have set for, I'm going to try it after a couple days and then out to a week and see how much they soften up. I'll add to this video at each of the intervals where I check the parts to give you an idea how effective this method is at softening your old rubber CT90 parts. Thanks. The two parts have been soaking in the wintergreen oil and rubbing alcohol mixture for about 4 days. So I figured I'd pull them out and see how they're doing. Here's the one diaphragm, and that's really looking good and almost as good as I want it, but I think I'm going to let it soak for a little while longer. Here's the other part that was really rigid, and again, it's in pretty darn good shape also. So it looks like the mixture is working well, and 4 days is pretty much getting us there. I think I'm going to go a full week though, and I'll come back and do another check after these have soaked for a full week. But with this mixture, it looks like about 4 days we get the best good results. And I'll come back after I do another check at a week. Okay, I let parts soak for a week in the mixture, and both parts came out nice and compliant. So as far as softening the rubber, I think it works out great. The parts are very compliant. The only thing I did notice is that there was quite a bit of swelling between the stock part. If you look at that part there, and then here's still a pretty hard part, and compare that here, there's still quite a bit of swelling that occurred. Now the parts actually fit fine on the mating parts on the bike, but there is a difference in length, so that could affect the overall fit. I'm going to try them out. These parts that were soaked and swelled have been setting about a day. I'm going to see if there's any shrinkage to bring them back down to size. So soaking the parts for a week seems to have a real good effect on softening the rubber, not so good of an effect as far as making the parts swell. I started 2 more parts just to see if a shorter duration might be better. These parts in here have been soaking for a little over a day, and this part here, there's been some swelling if I compare it to a stock part, not as much, but there's still a reasonable amount of softness. It's not as near as soft as the one that was soaked for a whole week, but it's still really usable and would fit real well. So I may just stop those parts there, or that part there at 1 day. Now this part, compared to a stock part, hasn't had much swelling, but it also is pretty hard in half the part. I'm going to try to let it go another day just to see if I can find that sweet spot as far as getting it quite a bit softer, but not causing it to swell too much. So this part's still very hard around the rim, and that's where it's always a pain to get it to mate to the carburetor. So I'm going to let that soak for another day. I'm going to call this part good because it's nice and compliant, and we'll see how it works on that other part after 2 days. So the method works, but you got to watch it for swelling of the rubber, and we'll see if these other parts don't shrink back down with time. Okay, it's been a couple weeks and I've been using the solution that's 1 part oil of wintergreen and 3 parts rubbing alcohol to try to soften the rubber elements on the airbox on my CT90s. And all of these parts have now been through that and soaked in the solution, and they all are just turned out great. They're all nice and soft now, as you can see. So the solution works really well. The one thing to keep in mind, though, that I did notice is that there can be some swelling of the rubber parts as the longer you soak in the parts in the solution. So what I found is that it generally takes about 2 days to soften up a part. Some of these parts that connect to the carburetors can be really hard, and they take generally, say, 3 or 4 days. But just kind of watch it. I've been soaking them in just a quart size yogurt container, and that works really well. And just pull them out every day or so, look and see if they are soft enough to keep you happy. And if they are, pull them out, rinse them off, and you're good to go. But again, there is some swelling. I've noticed if they swelled a lot and I let them set for several days, they tend to come back down to the original size. But overall, it seems like a real good method. Again, it's using 1 part oil of wintergreen, and this is the chemical name here, you can see on the bottle, and then 3 parts rubbing alcohol. Nothing special there, and the technique works pretty well. Thanks again.